At that time, Jesus came to Jericho and intended to pass through the town. Now a man there named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector and also a wealthy man, was seeking to see who Jesus was. But he could not see him because of the crowd, for he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree in order to see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When he reached the place, Jesus looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, for today I must stay at your house." And he came down quickly and received him by joy. When they all saw this, they began to grumble, saying, "He has gone to stay at the house of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Behold, half of my possessions, Lord, I shall give to the poor. And if I have extorted anything from anyone, I shall repay it 4 times over." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a descendant of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Zacchaeus, come down from that tree. I must come and stay at your house. That's the words Deacon Dale just read from this Gospel of Luke. And as you know, for the last several months, we've been exploring the Gospel of Luke, and we've encountered some beautiful parables that Jesus was telling us about and teaching to us about love and forgiveness and so forth. Today is not a parable. It's a story that Luke tells us that actually happened to Jesus. And it's an interesting story that's kind of got a very powerful lesson, but it's also kind of humorous. Jesus is traveling through Jericho. Now, we're not sure. Luke doesn't tell us what direction he's going in, up to Jerusalem or back from Jerusalem, but he's going through Jericho. And there's not much in Jericho. It's in the middle of the desert. It's not near a sea or anything really nice like waterfalls or something. It's kind of like it's a plain kind of little nothing town. So he's just passing through. He's not planning on doing any teaching there or working any miracles there. He's just passing through. But in this town, there is a man named Zacchaeus. And since Jericho is not very large, everybody knows Zacchaeus because he's one of the wealthiest men in town, if he's not the wealthiest, because he was wealthy, but he was also the tax collector, which helped him become wealthy because tax collectors were known to steal tax money. They'd go and collect taxes and put half in their pocket and give half to the government. So Zacchaeus was well known in this town. Everybody knew Zacchaeus. Even Jesus, when he comes to town, have obviously heard of this man named Zacchaeus, because he says Zacchaeus. He calls him by name. So Jesus is passing through this little Jericho town. He sees this man up in this tree. Now, it's important to understand what the people in the town are doing and how they're reacting. See, Zacchaeus, the wealthy man in town who was a tax collector who'd been stealing from everybody, wanted to see this guy named Jesus. He'd heard great things about him. He wants to lay eyes on him. And here he's coming through the city, and there's only a little bitty winding path that goes through Jericho. And he tries to go and see him, but he can't because the crowds are too great. And as the gospel said, Jericho is a little short thing. He couldn't see over the crowds. And nobody liked him. So they weren't going to say, let's let Zacchaeus get to the front of the crowd so he can see. They didn't like him. They weren't going to do him any favors. And nobody there was going to say, well, climb on my shoulders so you can see better. No, they didn't like him. He was a thief, the tax collector. So Zacchaeus, probably dressed in his robes with his chains and his rings and stuff and all of his royal garments, decides since nobody will help him see Jesus, he'll climb up the tree. So it must have been kind of a humorous thing when Jesus is walking down the street and sees this elegantly garbed man hanging from a tree trying to get a view of himself. He knows who he is, and that's why he says, Zacchaeus, get out of the tree. But what he says next is the powerful message, or the pivot point of the gospel, when he says, I must go stay with you. You notice Jesus invites himself. He doesn't wait for Zacchaeus to come to my house and dine with me. He tells Zacchaeus, I must go and stay with you because there's work to be done. And you notice when Zacchaeus hears that, Zacchaeus, get out of the tree. I must go and stay with you. The only response Zacchaeus gives is, you know I have stolen a lot, and so I'm going to give back what I've stolen to all those people. I've also kind of like cheated people. I'm going to make reparations fourfold, 4 times what I stole, I'm going to give back to them. There's going to be a metamorphosis. There's going to be a different Zacchaeus. After having met Jesus and encountered him, Jesus says, I'm going to come and stay with you. And once Jesus says that, Zacchaeus realizes if Jesus is going to come and stay with me, there's going to have to be some changes. I'm going to have to fix some things. And there's the gospel message for us. We might not be up in a tree, or maybe we are up in a tree or out on a limb, but we want to catch a glimpse of Jesus. We'd like to have Jesus come and stay with us. And Jesus invites himself to stay with us. He tells us, I will come and stay with you, and he does. Zacchaeus had the wisdom to fix what needed to be fixed. Do we? Jesus says to us just what he said to Zacchaeus. I will come and stay with you. When he comes, what's he going to see in our house? Literally. Is he going to see that there's something that needs to be fixed in the family? Maybe even in the marriage that needs to be tweaked a little bit? Some problems with perhaps a sibling or a child or a parent? Something that needs to be fixed? Something in our own prayer life? Perhaps an old grudge we're holding? What in our household needs to be fixed? He's coming to stay with us. Zacchaeus had the wisdom to fix what needed to be fixed. Do we? And not just in our household, in our hearts. What needs to be fixed if he's coming to stay with us? Am I truly learning from those parables of Luke about how to love and forgive? Have I really loved what it's like to be grateful? To be other-centered rather than self-centered? That's what all those parables were about. This gospel, this humorous gospel of a man hanging from a tree waiting to see Jesus, has a powerful pivot or metamorphosis point. And that is when Jesus says, I will come and stay with you. Zacchaeus had the wisdom to know when Jesus comes to stay with us, he needs to fix something. And he did. Jesus says to all the Zacchaeuses here, he says to us, I'm coming to stay with you. So what do we need to fix?